The sun was sinking low over the painted horizon of New Mexico Territory, 1878, when Samuel Zachary first spotted her, a lone woman sitting on the edge of a cliff, her shoulders shaking with unmistakable sobs that carried across the desert wind. Her silhouette against the burning sky made his heart catch in a way he couldn't explain, even though he'd sworn never to let it happen again. Samuel pulled back gently on the reins of his dun mare, pausing on the trail below. He wasn't one to intrude on private grief. God knew he'd had his share and preferred to bear it alone, but something about her solitary figure made him hesitate. They were 30 miles from the nearest town, and nightfall in these parts was no place for anyone to be alone, especially not a woman. He tipped his hat back, revealing the weathered face of a man who'd seen 35 hard years on the frontier. His decision made, he guided his horse up the narrow path. "Madam," he called softly when he was still 20 paces away, not wanting to startle her, "pardon the intrusion." The woman whirled around, hastily wiping at her tear-stained cheeks. Her eyes were the color of prairie grass after rain, red-rimmed and wary as they fixed on him. Her dress, once fine but now travel-worn and dusty, spoke of better days. "I don't need any help," she said, her voice cracking with emotion that betrayed her words. Samuel nodded, respecting her pride. "Never said you did, but night's coming and these parts get mighty unfriendly after dark." He dismounted, keeping a respectful distance. "Samuel Zachary," he offered, touching the brim of his hat. "Most folks call me Sam." She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "Katherine Zimmerman," she replied, the formality of her tone at odds with her disheveled appearance. "Most people call me Kate." "Pleasure, Miss Zimmerman." Samuel noticed the small valise beside her, its contents spilling out as if she'd been searching frantically through it. Letters were scattered on the ground, some torn, others crumpled. "You planning on camping here tonight?" Katherine laughed bitterly. "I wasn't planning anything," she admitted. "I was just—" Her voice faltered. "Everything's gone." Samuel glanced at the horizon, noting how quickly the light was fading. "Whatever you've lost, Miss Zimmerman, you've still got tomorrow," he said quietly, "and tomorrow's worth seeing through." She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if seeing past the dust of the trail and the worn leather of his clothing to something beneath. "And what makes you such an expert on tomorrows, Mr. Zachary?" "Had a fair number of them when I didn't expect to," he answered honestly. "Each one turned out better than dying." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I suppose that's one way to look at it." Samuel gestured to the darkening sky. "I've got coffee and beans, camp's just down by the creek. You're welcome to share a fire tonight and I'll escort you wherever you're headed come morning." He paused. No strings, no expectations, just one traveler helping another. Katherine gathered her scattered letters, carefully tucking them back into her valise. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Because I've been one," Samuel replied simply. "And because night's coming whether we like it or not." The truth of his words hung between them, and after a long moment, Katherine nodded, rising to her feet with a dignity that impressed him despite her circumstances. "Very well, Mr. Zachary. I accept your offer of hospitality, but only for tonight." Samuel nodded, not commenting on the way she clutched the valise to her chest like it contained her very soul. Whatever she'd lost, whatever had brought her to the edge of that cliff in tears, was her story to tell if and when she chose. He helped her onto his horse, handing her the reins while he led them down to the small creek where his campsite awaited. Neither spoke during the short journey, the silence between them filled with the evening sounds of the desert coyotes beginning their nightly chorus, the whisper of wind through scrub brush. His camp was simple but well organized. A small fire pit ready to be lit, his bedroll, saddlebags, and supplies arranged with the efficiency of a man accustomed to life on the move. Samuel helped Katherine down, then busied himself building a fire, giving her time to compose herself. "You travel light," she observed, watching him work. "Makes it easier to move on," he replied, striking his flint. The spark caught, and soon a small, cheerful fire pushed back the gathering darkness. "Been doing it most of my life." Katherine settled on a flat rock near the fire, the flames illuminating her face. She was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25, with a delicate beauty beneath the weariness and sorrow. "Where are you headed?" she asked as he set the coffee pot near the flames. "Silver Creek," he answered. "Got a job waiting at the McAllister Ranch." "A cowhand," Samuel nodded. "Foreman, if all goes well." "You don't look like most cowhands I've met," Katherine observed, studying him. He smiled slightly. "Spent time as a lot of things. Army scout, marshal for a spell. Ranch work suits me better these days. Less people shooting at you, I imagine. That's the hope." Samuel pulled out a small pouch of coffee and carefully measured it into the pot. "What about you? Where are you headed?" Katherine's eyes dropped to her hands, which were twisting nervously in her lap. "Nowhere in particular," she answered, her voice suddenly tight. "Anywhere else?" Samuel didn't press. He'd known enough people running from something to recognize the signs. Instead, he busied himself preparing their simple meal, giving her the space to gather her thoughts. As the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, they ate beans and hardtack in companionable silence. Katherine ate little, but Samuel noticed the way she savored the coffee, holding the tin cup between her hands as if drawing warmth from it. "My husband died 3 months ago," she said abruptly, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "Fever took him. Everyone said I was lucky he left me the house, a small business in Santa Fe." Samuel waited, sensing there was more to her story. "Yesterday I discovered he'd gambled everything away before he died," Katherine continued, her voice remarkably steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "Signed over the deed to the house, borrowed against the business. The men came yesterday to collect. I had an hour to pack what I could carry." Samuel nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "I found the letters in his desk. Years of lies." Katherine's fingers tightened around her cup. "Love letters from other women, promises he'd made and broken, debts I never knew about." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought I knew him. 6 years of marriage, and I never really knew him at all." "Some men are good at hiding who they really are," Samuel said quietly, thinking of men he'd known and hunted in his days wearing a marshal's badge. "I was a fool," Katherine whispered. "No," Samuel contradicted gently. "Just someone who chose to see the good. That's never foolish." Their eyes met across the fire, and something shifted in the space between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred souls who had both seen more than their share of life's harsher lessons. "You have family you can go to?" Samuel asked after a moment. Katherine shook her head. "My parents died when I was 19, no siblings. I came west with Edward because there was nothing left for me in Boston." A bitter smile touched her lips. "And now there's nothing here either." "There's tomorrow," Samuel reminded her gently. She looked at him skeptically. "Is that your answer for everything, Mr. Zachary? There's always tomorrow." "Only when it's true," he replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "And it is, Miss Zimmerman. Whatever you've lost, however bad today was, tomorrow's still coming. And in my experience, it usually brings something you didn't expect." Katherine fell silent, considering his words as the fire crackled between them. The night had grown cool, and Samuel noticed her slight shiver. Without comment, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn but clean wool blanket, offering it to her. "Thank you," she said softly, wrapping it around her shoulders. "For this and for," she gestured vaguely, not asking too many questions. "Everyone's entitled to their secrets," Samuel replied, pouring the last of the coffee into her cup. "Get some rest, I'll keep watch." "You don't have to, I sleep light anyway," he assured her. "Years of habit." Katherine studied him for a long moment, as if trying to unravel the mystery of why a stranger would show such kindness. "Good night then, Mr. Zachary." "Sam," he corrected gently. "If we're sharing a campfire, might as well use my name." The smile she offered in return was small but genuine. "Good night, Sam." "Night, Kate," he replied, watching as she arranged herself as comfortably as possible on the ground near the fire, her valise serving as a pillow. Long after her breathing had evened out in sleep, Samuel sat awake, keeping his promise to watch over her. He'd meant what he said about tomorrows. He'd seen too many men die to take any day for granted, and something told him that Katherine Zimmerman's tomorrows mattered more than most. The dawn broke over the desert with the sudden brilliance only the southwest could produce. Katherine awoke to find coffee already made and Samuel tending to his horse. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice low and gentle. "Sleep all right." Katherine sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair self-consciously. "Better than I expected," she admitted. It wasn't entirely true. Her dreams had been troubled with images of Edward's betrayal, of the men who'd come to take her home, but she had slept, which was more than she'd managed the night before. "There's a spot just around that bend where you can freshen up," Samuel said, gesturing toward the creek. "I'll keep my distance." Katherine appreciated his consideration. "Thank you." A few minutes later, having splashed cold water on her face and done what she could to make herself presentable, Katherine returned to find a simple breakfast waiting: dried beef and the last of the hardtack. "It's not much," Samuel apologized. "It's more than I had yesterday," she replied, accepting the food gratefully. She studied him in the morning light. His face was weathered by sun and wind, a thin scar running along his jawline, but his eyes were kind, deep blue and steady. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense that Edward had been, but there was something compelling about him. "So," Samuel said as they ate, "Silver Creek is about 2 days' ride from here. You're welcome to travel with me that far." Katherine hesitated. She had no destination in mind, no plan beyond the desperate need to get away from Santa Fe and the ruins of her life there. "I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition," he assured her. "Roads safer with company." There was wisdom in his offer. A woman traveling alone in the territories invited trouble, and though she barely knew Samuel Zachary, her instincts told her he was trustworthy. "All right," she decided. "Silver Creek sounds as good a place as any to start over." Something flickered in his eyes: approval, perhaps, or relief. "Town's growing. Might be opportunities there for a lady with education." Katherine raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think I'm educated?" Samuel smiled slightly. "The way you speak. The books in your valise saw them when you were gathering your things yesterday." She hadn't noticed him paying such close attention, and the observation surprised her. "I was a schoolteacher before I married," she admitted. "Edward thought it beneath his wife's dignity to work. Silver Creek's got no proper school yet. Just the preacher's wife teaching basics 3 days a week." Hope stirred faintly in Katherine's chest. "You think they might need a teacher?" "Town's full of families with young ones," Samuel replied, packing up the remains of their breakfast. "Worth asking, at least." It wasn't much, just the faintest possibility, but it was more direction than she'd had yesterday. "Thank you," Katherine said softly, "for giving me something to think about besides what I've lost." Samuel met her eyes briefly. "That's how it starts," he said. "Finding the one thing you can move toward instead of what you're running from." His words resonated with a truth Katherine felt deeply. "Is that what you did? After whatever it was that happened to you?" A shadow crossed his face. "Something like that." She didn't press for details, respecting his privacy as he had respected hers. Instead, she rose and began helping him break camp. Within the hour they were on the trail, Katherine perched behind Samuel on his mare. The arrangement was awkward, the closeness of their bodies, the necessity of her arms around his waist to keep her balance, but Samuel maintained a respectful silence, focusing on the trail ahead. As the day wore on and the sun climbed higher, Katherine found herself studying the landscape with new eyes. The vast expanses of desert and mesa that had seemed so empty and threatening the day before now revealed subtle beauties: the delicate blooms of cacti, the graceful soaring of a hawk against the endless blue sky, the shifting colors of the distant mountains. "It's beautiful in its way," she murmured, almost to herself. Samuel glanced back at her briefly. "Most folks only see the harshness. Takes time to notice the rest." "Is that why you stay out here, for the beauty?" He considered her question for a moment. "Partly," he answered. "Partly because out here a man is measured by what he does, not who his family was or how much money he has." It was the most personal statement he'd made, and Katherine sensed there was a story behind it. "And what are you measured by, Sam Zachary?" "My word," he replied simply. "Whether I keep it or not, and do you keep your word?" "Try to." His shoulders tensed slightly beneath her hands. "Failed a time or two, try not to make the same mistakes twice." They fell quiet again, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the vastness of the landscape encouraging contemplation rather than conversation. By midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a rocky outcropping, sharing the last of their water. "We'll reach Cottonwood Springs by nightfall," Samuel said, studying the horizon. "Small trading post there, can resupply and get proper rest." "I don't have much money," Katherine admitted, embarrassed. In her haste to leave Santa Fe, she'd grabbed what little cash she could find, hardly enough to sustain her for long. "Got enough for both of us," Samuel assured her. "You can pay me back once you're settled." His casual confidence that she would find her way, establish herself somewhere new, touched her deeply. It had been a long time since anyone had believed in her capabilities. "Edward always handled everything," she said, the admission difficult to voice. "The money, the decisions, I let him." Samuel studied her, his expression thoughtful. "Lot of women do," he replied, not unkindly. "Doesn't mean you can't learn to handle it yourself." "Is that another thing about tomorrow, that I can become someone different, not different," he corrected. "Just more of who you already are, without someone else's shadow falling over you." The insight surprised her. "You're not what I expected, Sam." A smile briefly lit his face, transforming his weathered features. "Expectations are tricky things, Kate. Usually say more about the person holding them than the one they're aimed at." The wisdom in his words struck her deeply. How many of her expectations about life, about marriage, about Edward had been projections of her own hopes and fears, rather than reality. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the terrain gradually changing as they moved northwest. The desert gave way to more varied landscapes, scattered piñon pines and juniper, rocky arroyos where flash floods carved paths through the earth during the rainy season. Samuel pointed out landmarks and signs of wildlife as they traveled, teaching Katherine to read the subtle language of the land. She was an eager student, finding that focusing on these new lessons helped keep the grief and uncertainty at bay. "Rabbit tracks," he noted, pausing briefly at a dusty crossing. "Fresh, and look there, coyote following after." Katherine leaned forward, studying the delicate impressions in the dirt. "The rabbit got away." "Tracks continue that way," Samuel confirmed, pointing. "Smart one changed direction here, headed for those rocks." "How can you tell so much from so little?" he shrugged. "Practice. When I was scouting for the army, reading sign meant the difference between life and death." "You must have been good at it," she observed. "Good enough to stay alive," he replied with characteristic understatement. As the sun began its descent, Cottonwood Springs appeared on the horizon, a cluster of buildings beside a stand of cottonwood trees that marked a reliable water source in this arid land. It was hardly a town, just a trading post with attached living quarters, a small stable, and what appeared to be a simple boarding house. "Not much," Samuel acknowledged, noting Katherine's expression, "but the beds are clean and Mrs. Hodgson makes a decent stew." The proprietor of the trading post, a grizzled man named Jeremiah Hodgson, greeted Samuel with the familiarity of previous acquaintance. "Zachary, headed up to Silver Creek at last, are you?" "That's the plan," Samuel confirmed, helping Katherine dismount before swinging down himself. "This is Miss Zimmerman. She's traveling with me." Hodgson's bushy eyebrows rose slightly, but he made no comment beyond a polite nod to Katherine. "Mrs. Hodgson's just putting supper on. 2 rooms, then." "Please," Samuel confirmed, and Katherine felt grateful for his automatic consideration of propriety. Mrs. Hodgson, a plump, cheerful woman with iron-gray hair, emerged from the back of the trading post, wiping her hands on her apron. "Samuel Zachary, as I live and breathe." "Been at least 2 years since you passed through." "Yes, madam," Samuel agreed, accepting her enthusiastic handshake. "Been working down in Arizona Territory." "Well, you're a sight for sore eyes. Who's your companion?" Mrs. Hodgson turned a warm smile toward Katherine. Before Samuel could answer, Katherine stepped forward. "Katherine Zimmerman," she introduced herself. "Recently widowed, Mr. Zachary was kind enough to escort me to Silver Creek, where I hope to find work." She saw Samuel's slight surprise at her direct approach, but felt a surge of independence in taking control of her own introduction. If she was to start a new life, she would need to stand on her own 2 feet. Mrs. Hodgson's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, dear. You're welcome here. She cast a knowing glance at Samuel. Always said this one had a good heart beneath all that trail dust. Samuel looked distinctly uncomfortable with the praise. Miss Zimmerman was a teacher before her marriage, he said, changing the subject. Thought she might find opportunity in Silver Creek. Oh, indeed, Mrs. Hodgson brightened. They're desperate for a proper teacher there. The Wilkins boy rode through just last week saying the town council's authorized funds for a schoolhouse and a teacher's salary. Katherine's heart leapt. Truly, indeed. Said they'd had 3 families arrive last month alone, all with young ones needing schooling. Silver Creek's growing fast with that new silver strike. For the first time since discovering Edward's betrayal, Katherine felt a flicker of genuine hope. A teaching position, a real salary, the chance to be useful and independent, it was more than she dared to imagine. See, Samuel said quietly, catching her eye, tomorrow's looking better already. The simple dinner that night was the best meal Katherine had eaten in days. Mrs. Hodgson's rabbit stew was hearty and flavorful, served with fresh biscuits and preserves. The Hodgsons' table was joined by the only other current guest, a traveling peddler named Oliver Wainwright, who regaled them with tales from his circuit through the territories. Silver Creek's booming, Wainwright confirmed when the conversation turned to their destination. New buildings going up every month. They've even got talk of bringing the railroad spur out that way if the mine keeps producing. Good for business, Samuel asked. Very, the peddler agreed enthusiastically. Sold out my entire stock of fabric last time through. The ladies there are eager for finery now that there's money flowing. Katherine listened attentively, mentally cataloging every detail about the town that might soon be her home. Are there many families? More arriving all the time, Wainwright assured her. Miners bring wealth, wealth brings merchants, merchants bring families, circle of civilization, as it were. After dinner, while the men remained at the table discussing the latest territorial news, Mrs. Hodgson drew Katherine aside to the small parlor adjoining the dining room. Now, dear, the older woman said kindly, I hope you don't mind my saying so, but you look like you could use a few necessities. I've put together a small basket, just some soap, hairpins, a spare handkerchief or 2. Katherine flushed with embarrassment at her obvious state of need, but was deeply touched by the gesture. That's very kind, but I couldn't. Nonsense, Mrs. Hodgson interrupted firmly. Women must look after one another out here. The territories are hard enough without pride getting in the way of practicality. Properly chastened, Katherine accepted the basket gratefully. Thank you. I hope to repay your kindness someday. Mrs. Hodgson patted her hand. Just do the same for another woman when you're able. That's payment enough. They sat together in comfortable conversation for a while, Mrs. Hodgson sharing stories of the 20 years she and her husband had run the trading post. Katherine found herself genuinely laughing for the first time in days at the older woman's colorful descriptions of some of their more unusual customers. And what about Mr. Zachary? Katherine asked eventually, her curiosity getting the better of her. You seem to know him well. Oh, Sam passes through every year or two, Mrs. Hodgson replied. Known him since he first came to the territories, must be 15 years ago now. Fine man, quieter than most. He mentioned he was a marshal once, Mrs. Hodgson nodded, for several years down in Arizona territory. Had quite a reputation for bringing in his quarry alive when others would have shot first. Why did he stop? The older woman's face grew serious. That's his story to tell if he chooses, but I will say this, sometimes a man finds that the path he's on isn't leading him where he wants to go. Katherine considered this cryptic response, wondering about the parts of Samuel Zachary's life he kept carefully hidden. There was a depth to him that intrigued her, a sense that behind his quiet competence lay experiences that had shaped him profoundly. When she retired to her room that night, a simple but clean space with a narrow bed, washstand, and small window overlooking the corral, Katherine found herself thinking not of Edward or what she'd lost, but of what might lie ahead in Silver Creek. For the first time in days, she fell asleep looking forward to tomorrow rather than dreading it. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Katherine woke early, using Mrs. Hodgson's borrowed soap to wash her hair and face, feeling refreshed and somehow lighter. She repacked her valise more carefully this time, no longer in the grip of panic that had characterized her hasty departure from Santa Fe. Samuel was already in the trading post when she came downstairs, settling accounts with Jeremiah Hodgson and purchasing supplies for the remainder of their journey. He nodded a greeting, his eyes briefly taking in her improved appearance. Ready to ride. He asked when the transactions were complete. Yes, Katherine replied with newfound determination. I'm ready. They bid farewell to the Hodgsons with promises to stop again on any return journey through the area. Mrs. Hodgson pressed a small package of food into Katherine's hands, waving away her thanks. Back on the trail, the day's journey proved more challenging than the first. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they approached the foothills that would lead them to Silver Creek. Samuel guided his horse skillfully through narrow passes and across rocky streambeds, ever alert for potential dangers. You know this route well, Katherine observed during a brief rest stop. Traveled it many times, Samuel confirmed. Used to be Apache territory. Still is, technically, though most have been moved to reservations now. Katherine detected a note of disapproval in his tone. You don't agree with that policy? Samuel was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Spent enough time with the Apache to respect their ways, he finally answered. They understood this land better than any white man ever will. Seems wrong to take it from them just because we want what's beneath it. Yet you're heading to a mining town, Katherine pointed out gently. World changes whether we agree with how or not, he replied with a shrug. Just try to do right by my own conscience within it. It was a philosophy. Katherine found herself admiring this pragmatic recognition of reality coupled with a personal determination to maintain one's own moral compass. By mid-afternoon, the weather shifted abruptly, as it often did in the high desert. Dark clouds gathered over the distant mountains, and the wind picked up, carrying the unmistakable scent of rain. Storm coming, Samuel noted, scanning the horizon with concern. Need to find shelter before it hits. Katherine felt his body tense as he urged the horse to a faster pace. Is it dangerous? Flash floods in these arroyos can come without warning, he explained tersely. Water from miles away funnels through these canyons. Beautiful day can turn deadly in minutes. His concern was infectious, and Katherine found herself clinging tighter to him as they pushed forward at a near gallop. The first fat raindrops began to fall just as Samuel guided them toward what appeared to be a shallow cave in the rock face alongside the trail. Here, he said, dismounting quickly and helping Katherine down. Get inside while I see to the horse. The sky opened just as they reached shelter, rain pouring down in sheets that quickly transformed the dry creek bed beside the trail into a rushing torrent. Samuel led his mare to the back of the shallow cave, where the animal would be protected from both rain and potential floodwaters. Will we be safe here? Katherine asked, watching the rapidly rising water with alarm. Cave's high enough above the wash, Samuel assured her, though his eyes remained watchful. Seen worse storms, this one should pass quickly. Confined in the small space, they sat side by side against the rock wall, watching the dramatic display of nature's power. Lightning split the sky, followed by crashes of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. Despite the danger, Katherine found the wild beauty of the storm exhilarating. It's magnificent, she breathed, as another bolt of lightning illuminated the landscape. Samuel glanced at her, a smile touching the corner of his mouth. Most women I've known would be terrified. I probably should be, she admitted. But there's something freeing about it, seeing such power and knowing we're just small parts of something much larger. Philosophy during a thunderstorm, Samuel observed, his voice warm with what sounded like admiration. You continue to surprise me, Kate. The use of her familiar name sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Over the past 2 days, Barriers had slowly lowered between them, the cautious formality giving way to something that felt increasingly like friendship. Or perhaps something more, though Katherine quickly pushed that thought aside as inappropriate. When I was a girl in Boston, storms meant staying indoors, drawing the curtains, pretending the wildness didn't exist, she said, watching the rain. Edward was the same way. Always containing, controlling, making everything proper and predictable. And you wanted the wildness, Samuel guessed astutely. Katherine considered this, surprised by the insight. I suppose I did, in a way. I thought coming west would mean adventure, new horizons. Instead, I found myself in another carefully constructed cage, just with different views outside the windows. No more cages now, Samuel observed. No, she agreed softly. No more cages. The storm raged for nearly an hour before beginning to abate, the thunder moving eastward and the rain slowing to a gentle patter. During that time, they talked more freely than they had before, Katherine sharing stories of her childhood in Boston. Her dreams of adventure that had led her to accept Edward's proposal and journey west. Samuel offering glimpses of his own past, growing up the son of a Pennsylvania coal miner who had died young, leaving him to make his own way at 16. How did you end up in the territories? Katherine asked as the last rumbles of thunder faded into the distance. Army first, Samuel replied, his gaze distant with memory. Signed up during the war, though I was too young to see much fighting, after they sent us west to pacify the frontier. His mouth twisted slightly at the phrase. Didn't much care for that work, but learned tracking, scouting. When my enlistment ended, those skills served me well enough as a marshal. And now you're to be a ranch foreman, Katherine mused. You've lived many lives, it seems. Just the one, he corrected, taking different turns along the way. The rain finally stopped altogether, leaving behind a washed landscape of intense colors, the red rocks deeper, the sparse vegetation vibrant against the dark, wet earth. The arroyo beside them now carried a substantial stream of muddy water, but the level had already begun to recede. We'll wait another hour for the ground to firm up, Samuel decided, stepping to the mouth of the cave to survey the conditions. Won't make Silver Creek by nightfall now, but there's a lined shack about 10 miles ahead where we can shelter safely. Katherine joined him at the entrance, breathing in the fresh, rain-cleaned air. I've never smelled anything so wonderful, she remarked. Desert after rain, Samuel agreed. Nothing quite like it. They stood side by side, watching the transformation of the landscape as the clouds parted and shafts of late afternoon sunlight broke through, illuminating the rain-drenched scene with an almost otherworldly glow. Without conscious thought, Katherine found herself leaning slightly against Samuel's solid presence beside her, drawing comfort from his steadiness. If he noticed, he gave no sign, but neither did he move away. They remained that way for several minutes, sharing a moment of natural beauty that required no words. Eventually, Samuel determined it was safe to continue their journey. The going was slower now, the ground muddy and treacherous in places, but his knowledge of the terrain guided them safely forward as the day waned toward dusk. The lined shack, when they reached it, was primitive but sound, a single room with a plank floor, small fireplace, and rough bunk built into one wall. Samuel quickly settled his horse in the lean-to shelter attached to the rear of the cabin, then set about gathering dry wood from the protected stack against the wall. Not much, he apologized, gesturing to the sparse accommodations as he built a fire in the small hearth. But dry and safe. It's perfect, Katherine assured him, and meant it. After the emotionally and physically exhausting days since leaving Santa Fe, any shelter was welcome. The fact that this one came with Samuel's reassuring presence made it all the better. The fire caught quickly, spreading welcome warmth through the small space. Samuel prepared a simple meal from their supplies, and they ate in comfortable silence, both tired from the day's journey. As darkness fell outside, Katherine found herself studying Samuel in the firelight. There was an ease to his movements, an economy that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin and capabilities. His face, relaxed now in the golden glow, revealed a gentleness that his weathered exterior often concealed. Thank you, she said suddenly. Samuel looked up from the coffee he was pouring. For what? For finding me on that cliff, for saying what you did about tomorrow. Katherine met his eyes directly. I think you saved my life, though I didn't realize it at the time. A shadow crossed his face. Don't give me too much credit. Just said what seemed true. Why did you stop? She pressed, suddenly needing to understand. You could have ridden past, most men would have. Samuel was quiet for so long that Katherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and weighted with memory. Lost someone once, someone who thought tomorrow wasn't worth seeing. He set down his coffee cup, his hands not quite steady. Found her too late. The raw pain in those simple words reached across the space between them, touching something equally vulnerable in Katherine's heart. Without thinking, she moved to sit beside him, her hand covering his. I'm sorry, she whispered. He nodded once, accepting her sympathy without elaboration. But his hand turned beneath hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that needed no explanation. They sat that way for a long time, the fire crackling in the hearth, the wind occasionally gusting around the corners of the small cabin. No more words passed between them, but something significant had shifted, a connection formed through shared pain and mutual understanding. When Katherine finally rose to prepare for sleep, Samuel stood as well. I'll take the floor, he said, reaching for his bedroll. The bunk is wide enough, Katherine replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Reading his expression, she quickly added, just to sleep, I trust you, Sam. Their eyes held for a moment, and she saw both his surprise and his careful consideration of her suggestion. Are you certain? Yes, she answered simply. I don't want to be alone tonight. In the end, they slept side by side on the narrow bunk, a proper distance maintained between them, each wrapped in their own blanket. But Katherine found immense comfort in the sound of his steady breathing beside her, in the knowledge that she was not facing the darkness alone. Morning brought a landscape, transformed the storm's aftermath, revealed in mud-slicked trails and swollen creeks. But the sky was clear, promising a fine day for the final leg of their journey to Silver Creek. They departed the line shack at first light, both somewhat shy after the intimacy of their shared night, though nothing improper had occurred. The conversation as they rode was lighter, focused on practical matters, what Katherine might expect in Silver Creek, the people Samuel knew there, the possibilities that awaited. Town's grown since I last passed through, Samuel told her as they crossed a ridge that offered their first distant view of Silver Creek, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. New boarding house, proper church, even talk of a hotel being built. It looks hopeful, Katherine said, surprised by the emotion that welled in her chest at the sight. After days of uncertainty and grief, the prospect of a new beginning in this distant settlement filled her with unexpected optimism. As they descended into the valley, the details of the town came into clearer focus. Silver Creek was indeed growing, new construction evident on its outskirts, a main street lined with businesses, side streets with modest homes. Compared to Santa Fe, it was tiny, but Katherine could see the ambition in its layout, the promise of prosperity. People called greetings to Samuel as they rode down the main street, recognition and welcome evident in their faces. He responded with nods and brief words, but Katherine could sense his discomfort with being the center of attention. Zachary, about time you showed up. A burly man with a magnificent mustache emerged from what appeared to be the town's general store. McAllister's been asking after you daily. Walton, Samuel greeted him, reining his horse to a stop. Just headed out to the ranch now. This is Miss Katherine Zimmerman. She's interested in the teaching position. The man's bushy eyebrows rose as he took in Katherine's presence. Well now, that's fortunate timing. Town council meets tomorrow night to discuss that very matter. He tipped his hat to her. Martin Walton, madam. I serve as mayor when not minding the store. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Walton, Katherine replied, summoning her most composed demeanor despite her travel-worn appearance. I'd be most interested in discussing the position. Mrs. Walton will be delighted, the mayor declared. She's been pestering me for months about finding a real teacher for the children, Perhaps you do us the honor of taking supper at our home this evening. Give you a chance to meet some of the council members informally." Katherine glanced at Samuel, uncertain how to proceed now that their journey was concluding. Would they simply part ways here on the main street? Reading her hesitation, Samuel spoke. "I need to report to McAllister first, but I can escort Miss Zimmerman to your home later if that's acceptable." Relief flooded through Katherine at this small reprieve from immediate separation. "Excellent," Walton agreed. 7 o'clock, the missus will be thrilled." After providing directions to the McAllister ranch, Walton hurried off to spread the news of both Samuel's arrival and the appearance of a potential schoolteacher. Katherine found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden shift in circumstances from anonymous traveler to the object of the town's interest in the space of minutes. "You don't have to escort me tonight," she told Samuel as they continued toward the edge of town. "I'm sure you'll be busy with your new position." "Promised I would," he replied simply. "Besides, might help to have someone introduce you properly." His steady reliability touched her deeply. In the few days since they'd met, Samuel Zachary had become the one fixed point in her appended world, a source of stability she hadn't realized how much she needed. The McAllister Ranch lay 3 miles beyond town, a substantial operation with a large main house, bunkhouse, barns, and corrals spread across a valley with a creek running through it. Cattle grazed on the surrounding hillsides, and the sounds of ranch work filled the air as they approached. A tall, silver-haired man emerged from the main house as they rode into the yard. "Zachary, beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "Just delayed, Mr. McAllister," Samuel replied, dismounting and helping Katherine down. "This is Miss Katherine Zimmerman." Circumstances put us on the same road to Silver Creek. McAllister's keen eyes took in Katherine's appearance and the fact that she'd been riding double with Samuel, but he made no comment beyond a courteous greeting. "Welcome to the Circle M, Miss Zimmerman. I understand you're our potential schoolteacher. News travels quickly," Katherine observed with a small smile. "Small towns," McAllister agreed good-naturedly. "No secrets here. They were invited inside where Mrs. McAllister, a handsome woman with kind eyes, immediately took charge of Katherine's comfort, offering refreshments and the use of their spare bedroom to rest and prepare for the evening's dinner with the Waltons. "You poor dear, traveling all that way on horseback," Mrs. McAllister sympathized. "A proper bath and a few hours' rest will set you right." While Katherine was whisked away to the promised comforts, Samuel remained with McAllister to discuss his new duties as ranch foreman. The separation, though necessary and expected, left Katherine with a strange sense of loss. In just a few days, she had grown accustomed to Samuel's presence, to the quiet security he provided. Mrs. McAllister proved to be as efficient as she was kind. Within an hour, Katherine found herself soaking in a proper bath, her travel-worn clothes whisked away to be laundered, and a simple but clean dress provided from my niece's trunk she left at last visit, and won't miss it a bit. The hot water and brief rest worked wonders for both Katherine's body and spirit. By late afternoon, she emerged from the guest room feeling more herself than she had in days. The borrowed dress was a bit large but presentable, and Mrs. McAllister had helped her arrange her hair in a simple but elegant style. "There," the older woman said with satisfaction, "pretty as a picture. The town council won't be able to refuse you now." Katherine blushed at the praise. "You're very kind, Mrs. McAllister. Nonsense, just practical. This town needs a proper teacher, and from what little we've spoken, you seem perfectly suited." Mrs. McAllister patted her hand. "Besides, any woman who can travel for days with Samuel Zachary and emerge with her dignity intact has shown considerable character." The statement, delivered with a knowing twinkle, made Katherine's blush deepen. "Mr. Zachary was a perfect gentleman," she assured her hostess. "Oh, I've no doubt of that," Mrs. McAllister replied. "Known Sam for years. Man's sense of honor is as solid as they come." She studied Katherine's face thoughtfully. "Just saying he's not known for taking on traveling companions. Must have seen something special in you." Before Katherine could formulate a response to this observation, A knock at the door announced Samuel's arrival to escort her to town for the dinner with the Waltons. The sight of him, freshly shaved and dressed in clean clothing, caused a flutter in her chest that she tried unsuccessfully to ignore. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her formally, though his eyes conveyed a warmer message. "You look." He paused, seemingly searching for an appropriate word. "Restored. Amazing what a bath and clean clothes can accomplish," she replied lightly, though deeply aware of his appreciative gaze. "Mrs. McAllister watched their interaction with evident interest, but limited herself to practical instructions about the carriage Samuel had arranged and assurances that Katherine was welcome to return to the ranch after the dinner if the hour grew late. The journey to town in the borrowed buggy provided the first opportunity for private conversation since their arrival at the ranch. Katherine found herself uncharacteristically nervous, uncertain how to navigate this new phase of their acquaintance now that their journey was complete. "You seem to be settling into your position already," she observed, noting the confidence with which Samuel handled the horses. "McAllister's a fair employer," he replied, "makes the transition easier." "And the Waltons, what should I expect tonight?" Samuel considered her question thoughtfully. "Martin's straightforward, perhaps a bit bombastic, but honest. His wife Harriet is the real force in town, serves on every committee, knows everyone's business, but uses that knowledge to help more often than harm. And the teaching position, do you think it's a real opportunity?" "Very real," he assured her. "Town's growing fast, needs a proper school. The temporary arrangement with the preacher's wife isn't keeping pace with the number of children arriving." Katherine nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It seems almost too fortunate arriving just as they're seeking a teacher." Samuel glanced at her. "Perhaps it's just tomorrow arriving when you needed it most." The reference to their first conversation brought a smile to Katherine's lips. "You and your tomorrows, Mr. Zachary." "Served us well so far," he pointed out with a slight smile of his own. The Waltons' home was one of the larger residences in Silver Creek, a two-story structure with a wrap-around porch and carefully tended garden. Several carriages already lined the street outside, indicating that other guests had arrived. Samuel helped Katherine down from the buggy, his hand lingering briefly on hers. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She took a deep breath, straightening her borrowed dress. "As I'll ever be." The evening that followed was a whirlwind of introductions, questions about her qualifications, and discussions of the town's educational needs. Katherine found herself at the center of attention, her background as a Boston-educated schoolteacher clearly impressive to the town's leadership. Throughout the dinner, Samuel remained a steady presence at her side, occasionally offering comments that supported her suitability for the position, but mostly allowing her to demonstrate her own capabilities. Katherine was grateful for his quiet confidence in her, drawing strength from it as she navigated the social complexities of making a good impression. By the end of the evening, it was clear that the town council members present were enthusiastic about her potential appointment. Only the formality of the next night's official meeting stood between Katherine and a position that would provide her not only with employment, but with housing a small but private room above the current schoolroom, until the new schoolhouse was completed. "I believe we can consider the matter all but settled," Martin Walton declared as Samuel and Katherine prepared to depart. "Just need to make it official tomorrow night." "Thank you for your consideration," Katherine replied, genuinely moved by the welcome she had received. "I look forward to serving Silver Creek's children." As they drove back toward the McAllister Ranch in the moonlight, Katherine felt a curious mixture of elation and melancholy. The prospect of meaningful work, of a place in this growing community, filled her with hope. Yet the knowledge that her time with Samuel was drawing to a natural conclusion brought an unexpected sadness. "You impressed them," Samuel said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Not that I had any doubt you would." "Thank you for your confidence," Katherine replied. "And for everything else. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me on that cliff." Samuel's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "You'd have found your way," he said after a moment. "You're stronger than you realize." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But I'm grateful I didn't have to find out alone." They reached the turnoff to the McAllister Ranch, but instead of taking it, Samuel guided the horses to stop beneath a large cottonwood tree beside the road. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast desert sky in breathtaking profusion. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Katherine murmured, tilting her head back to take in the celestial display. "Very," Samuel agreed, though when she glanced at him, she found his eyes on her rather than the stars. The intensity of his gaze sent a warm current through her veins. "Sam," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say but feeling the need to acknowledge the connection that had formed between them. "I'm glad I found you," he said simply, his voice low in the darkness. "Not just because you needed help, because I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with unfamiliar territory. "I've been wandering a long time, never staying anywhere for long. First time in years I've felt like maybe there's a reason to put down roots." Katherine's heart quickened at his words. "Is that what you want, roots?" "Didn't think I did," he admitted. "Not until recently." The moment hung between them, fraught with possibility. Katherine was acutely aware of his proximity, of the privacy afforded by the moonlit night, of the way her own feelings had evolved from gratitude to something far more complex in the days they'd spent together. "It's too soon," she whispered, as much to herself as to him. "Edward's only been gone 3 months. I shouldn't." "I know," Samuel agreed, respecting the boundary she'd drawn even as his eyes conveyed deeper emotions. "Not asking for anything, Kate, just wanted you to know that finding you changed something for me too." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. This man, who chose his words so carefully, who revealed himself only in measured degrees, was offering a truth that required tremendous courage. "Perhaps," Katherine said cautiously, "once I'm settled in my position, once some time has passed, perhaps we might explore what this could become." The hope that kindled in his eyes warmed her more than any declaration could have. "I'd like that," Samuel replied quietly. They returned to the McAllister Ranch shortly after, the unspoken promise between them adding a new dimension to their farewell for the night. Samuel would remain in the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands, while Katherine enjoyed the comforts of the guest room, a proper separation that nonetheless felt temporary in a way that excited rather than dismayed her. The following day brought a flurry of activity as Katherine prepared for the town council meeting. Mrs. McAllister proved an invaluable ally, providing a more suitable dress for the occasion and offering insights into the personalities and priorities of the council members. Samuel was occupied with his new duties at the ranch, but arranged to escort Katherine to the meeting that evening. When he arrived at the main house to collect her, the appreciation in his eyes as he took in her appearance gave her a confidence that served her well during the formal interview that followed. The town council, as Martin Walton had predicted, voted unanimously to offer Katherine the position of schoolteacher for Silver Creek. The salary was modest but fair, the accommodations simple but adequate, and the opportunity to shape the educational future of the growing community exactly the purpose Katherine had been seeking. "Congratulations, Miss Zimmerman," Council Chairman Porter declared after the vote. "We'll expect you to begin lessons on Monday next, if that suits." "Perfectly," Katherine agreed, barely containing her excitement. "I'll prepare a curriculum immediately." As they left the town hall, Katherine walking beside Samuel in the cool evening air, she felt a lightness that had been absent for months. "It's really happening," she marveled. "A new beginning." "You've earned it," Samuel replied, his voice warm with pride. They walked slowly back toward where he'd left the buggy, neither in a hurry to end the evening. Silver Creek was settling into its nightly rhythms around them, lights glowing in windows, the saloon's piano music drifting down the street, residents calling greetings as they passed. "I like this town," Katherine observed. "It feels possible here." "That's a good word for it," Samuel agreed. "Possible." They reached the buggy, but instead of immediately helping her up, Samuel turned to face her, his expression serious. "I meant what I said last night, Kate. About roots, about wanting to see where this," he gestured between them, "might lead. But I understand if you need time." Katherine studied his face in the lamplight from a nearby storefront, the strength and character written there, the patience and kindness she'd come to value so deeply. 3 months ago, her world had shattered with Edward's death and the subsequent discovery of his betrayal. A week ago, she'd been crying on a cliff edge, believing she had nothing left. Now, standing before this good man who had shown her that tomorrow was always worth seeing, Katherine felt something she had thought lost forever: hope, not just for a new career or community, but for the possibility of a love based on truth and mutual respect. "I do need time," she acknowledged softly, "but not distance." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "Silver Creek isn't so large that we can't see each other regularly, perhaps Sunday dinners after church." The smile that transformed Samuel's weathered face was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd endured. "I'd like that very much," he replied, his fingers gently closing around hers. They rode back to the McAllister ranch in comfortable conversation, planning the practicalities of Katherine's move to her new accommodations above the schoolroom the following day. The future that had seemed so bleak just days before now stretched before her with promising possibilities. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Katherine established herself in Silver Creek. The schoolroom, though basic, provided an adequate space for the 28 children who appeared for lessons that first Monday, ranging in age from 6 to 16, with widely varying levels of previous education. Katherine threw herself into the challenge with enthusiasm, developing a curriculum that accommodated the diverse needs of her students while maintaining high expectations for all. The children, initially wary of this newcomer from the East, quickly warmed to her patient teaching style and genuine interest in their progress. The promised new schoolhouse began construction on the edge of town, its foundation laid with ceremony as the entire community turned out to celebrate this sign of Silver Creek's prosperity and commitment to education. Katherine found herself consulted on the design, her practical suggestions for classroom layout and lighting welcomed by the builders. Throughout these busy days, Samuel remained a steady presence in her life, though his duties at the McAllister ranch kept him occupied from dawn till dusk. True to their agreement, they met for Sunday dinner after church, sometimes at the hotel restaurant, sometimes at the home of the Waltons or McAllisters, who had taken a benevolent interest in their developing friendship. As October gave way to November and the high desert landscape took on the golden hues of autumn, Katherine found herself increasingly looking forward to these Sunday meetings. Samuel would arrive, freshly shaved and in his best shirt, often bringing some small gift, a book he thought she might enjoy, wildflowers gathered on his morning ride, once even a delicate silver pendant he'd commissioned from the town's jeweler. They would walk together after the meal, gradually expanding the circle of their shared confidences. Katherine learned about the woman Samuel had lost, a young widow he'd been courting during his martial days, who had taken her own life after receiving news that her son had died in an accident back east. He spoke of his guilt at not recognizing the depth of her despair, of how her death had prompted him to leave the marshal's service and seek a quieter life. In turn, Katherine shared the complex truth of her marriage to Edward, how his charm had masked a fundamental selfishness, how she had gradually dimmed her own light to avoid outshining him, how the discovery of his betrayals had been almost a relief amidst the grief, confirming suspicions she'd long harbored but denied. Each revelation brought them closer, building a foundation of trust and understanding that neither had experienced in previous relationships. By the time the first snow dusted the mountains surrounding Silver Creek in early December, Katherine knew with certainty that what she felt for Samuel Zachary was far deeper than gratitude or friendship. The town's Christmas preparations provided further opportunities for their paths to intersect. Samuel volunteered to cut and deliver the massive pine tree that would grace the town square, while Katherine organized her students to create decorations and practice carols for the holiday celebration. On the evening of the tree lighting ceremony, 2 weeks before Christmas, Samuel found Katherine putting the finishing touches on the schoolroom's display of student artwork for parents to admire before the festivities. Need any help? He asked from the doorway, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his coat. Katherine turned, her face lighting with pleasure at his unexpected appearance. I thought you'd be helping with the tree. All done, he replied, stepping inside and removing his hat. Wanted to see you before the crowd gathers. Something in his tone caught her attention. Is everything all right? Samuel nodded, crossing the room to stand before her. McAllister offered me a partnership in the ranch today, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. Said he's getting too old to manage it all, has no son to pass it to. Sam, that's wonderful, Katherine exclaimed, genuinely delighted for him. You've earned his trust completely, means I'll be staying, Samuel continued, his eyes holding hers intently. Permanently. The significance of his statement hung between them. No more wandering, no more temporary positions, roots, just as he'd spoken of that night after her interview with the town council. I'm glad, Katherine said softly. Silver Creek suits you. It's not just the town, Samuel replied, taking a step closer. It's knowing you're here, seeing you build your life, watching how these children flourish under your care. He paused, seeming to gather his courage. Kate, I know it hasn't been long, 4 months since Edward died, she acknowledged. Almost 2 since we met. Too soon, he asked simply. Katherine considered his question carefully, aware of the gravity of the moment. The conventional mourning period for a widow was a year, sometimes 2. Yet her marriage to Edward had ended in truth long before his death, dissolved in the acid of his betrayals. What she felt for Samuel was wholly different, built on respect, honesty, shared values, and a deepening affection that enriched rather than diminished her sense of self. In his presence she felt not smaller as she had with Edward, but more fully herself. No, she finally answered. Not too soon. The relief and joy that crossed his face made her heart swell. Samuel reached for her hands, holding them gently between his own. I love you, Katherine, he said, the words simple but profound. Have almost since that first day when you looked up at me from that cliff with tears on your face but determination in your eyes. Katherine blinked back, tears of a different sort now. And I love you, Samuel. For showing me that tomorrow was worth seeing. For being the kind of man who stops when others would ride past. He drew her closer, one hand rising to trace the curve of her cheek with tender reverence. I don't have much to offer, yet just a promise of partnership in the ranch, a small cabin I've been building on the property. It's more than enough, she assured him, leaning into his touch. We'll build the rest together. When he finally kissed her, it felt like the fulfillment of a promise made that first evening by the campfire that tomorrow would bring something unexpected and wonderful. His lips were gentle against hers, the kiss conveying respect and passion in equal measure. Outside, the town bell began to ring, summoning everyone to the tree lighting ceremony. Samuel reluctantly drew back, though he kept her hands in his. Guess we should join the others, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Yes, Katherine agreed, though she made no move to leave the circle of his presence. But first, she reached up to touch his face, memorizing the moment. Thank you for finding me, Sam. His smile warmed her more than any fire could have. Thank you for being worth finding, Kate. Hand in hand, they walked out into the snowy evening to join the community celebration. As the great pine tree blazed with candles and the townspeople raised their voices in song, Katherine looked around at the life she had found meaningful work, a welcoming community, and most precious of all, a love born of kindness and honesty. Edward's betrayal had taken everything she thought she had, but in losing it all, she had found something far more valuable: her own strength, her true purpose, and a partner who saw her clearly and loved what he saw. Samuel's arm slipped around her waist as they stood among their neighbors, his solid presence an anchor in her new life. Tomorrow had indeed been worth seeing, and all the tomorrows that stretched before them now promised a joy she had once thought forever beyond her reach. The following spring, as wildflowers carpeted the hills around Silver Creek, Katherine Zimmerman became Katherine Zachary in a simple ceremony attended by the entire town. They exchanged their vows beneath an arch of early blossoms at the entrance to the new schoolhouse, which had been completed just in time for the occasion. The small cabin Samuel had built on the McAllister, now the McAllister and Zachary ranch, became their first home together. Its simple rooms transformed by Katherine's touch into a haven of warmth and comfort. On summer evenings, they would sit on the porch he had added as a wedding gift, watching the sun set over land that was partly theirs, making plans for the future that once had seemed so uncertain. Katherine continued teaching, her classroom expanding as Silver Creek grew, while Samuel's partnership with McAllister flourished, bringing prosperity that allowed them to begin building a larger home the following year. When their first child arrived, a daughter with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, they named her Hope, a testament to what they had found in each other. On quiet nights, with their daughter sleeping peacefully and the vast desert sky scattered with stars above their home, Katherine would sometimes remember that desperate day on the cliff edge. How close she had come to giving up, how differently her story might have ended if a quiet cowboy hadn't found her crying over what she'd lost, and reminded her that she still had tomorrow, that tomorrow had become today, and today was more beautiful than she had ever dared to imagine.